So welcome back, guys. Hello. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, this channel is all about Bitcoin. We're talking about how to navigate Bitcoin and more importantly, understanding how Bitcoin actually works. That's the goal of my channel, right? It's not providing investment strategies or anything like that. It's really mostly about understanding how Bitcoin works from first principles. And I have prompted you in previous episodes to let me know some of the common questions that you might have. And today I'm going to tackle some of the most common questions I get. And honestly, I'm going to start with this one. So this is like a Q&A episode where I'm going to talk about some of the statements or quote unquote questions that I get and some of my responses to that, right? So this is a Q&A episode. And again, this is titled, I Can't Afford to Buy Any Bitcoin. It's Too Expensive. But I'm also going to answer, how do I buy Bitcoin? Do I need $100,000 to buy Bitcoin? It's too expensive, right? So we're going to discuss all of that. And by the end of this video, you're going to have a little bit more of a practical understanding of what you need to get started. How do you buy Bitcoin? What's the difference between holding real Bitcoin versus owning it through an ETF? Thinking about how you time your purchases. So some of the practical advice topics, but I'm just going to provide a very quick disclaimer here by saying, before we get into this is not financial advice at all. I am not your financial advisor. Please always do your own research before investing in anything. My goal is really here to explain the concepts such that you can make your own informed decisions. And again, guys, we're only at 3%. So if you're watching this video and you're trying to educate yourself on Bitcoin, great, good for you. Because again, we're at 3%. If you look around your peer group, your friends, how many people actually really understand how Bitcoin works, right? If you ask anyone in the street, how does Bitcoin work? You're gonna get a lot of blank stares. But it's transitioning from speculative investing to institutional interest. So it definitely is a good idea in order to learn about Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, all of these other alternative assets in greater details, right? So this is the reason that I'm doing this today. But anyways, let's get into it, right? So how do I buy Bitcoin? I honestly, how do I buy Bitcoin? Followed closely by the question of, I can't afford Bitcoin. It's too expensive. So we're going to talk about how we buy Bitcoin a bit later, but Bitcoin is too expensive already. I missed the boat. I can't get in. It's already at $100,000. Like, do you think it's a good time to get in? So these are generally a lot of the questions that I get, and I totally get where all of this comes from. So if you look at the price and a price for something says $100,000, yeah, that's a big number. We're at 6 digits, but I still remember the time when Bitcoin was $1,000 only, right? And you thought, okay, $1,000 was expensive. Then you thought $10,000 was expensive. Now we're thinking $100,000 is expensive. And soon Bitcoin might reach the point of being a 7-digit number, maybe an 8-digit number, right? But these are big numbers, but it sounds like you need $100,000 to get started. And what I want to say, the reality is, no, that's not what you need. Bitcoin is a highly divisible asset. Bitcoin is divisible into 100 million units called Satoshis. You might have also heard this term about, we're going to stack sats or stacking sats. And what they're referring to is stacking Satoshis, right? Or sats for short. But you can think of it as like cents in a dollar, except, instead of having 100 cents equals $1, there are 100 million Satoshis or 100 million sats in one Bitcoin. Ultimately, what does this mean? It means that you don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. You can start with whatever amount you're comfortable with. Maybe it's $10, maybe it's $100, maybe it's $500. It's completely up to you. Again, this is not financial advice. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm just dispelling this myth that you need to buy a whole Bitcoin And in order to buy a whole Bitcoin, you need $100,000. And sometimes I question and I wonder if this misconception is what is holding retail investors back. Maybe a lot of people just don't understand that you can start with fractions, right? So if you buy $50 worth of Bitcoin, you're still a Bitcoin holder. You own a slice of the pie. And because it's digital, those slices can be tiny, right? But they still carry the same properties of a full coin. So that's, I would say, like myth number one busted. You don't need to be rich to get started with Bitcoin at all. And then this is followed by like the second question, or the first question that I asked, if you will, the practical side. Like, how do I buy Bitcoin? I still get asked that question. People don't know how they buy Bitcoin. So, if you want to own the actual underlying Bitcoin, you're going to need to go through something called an exchange or a peer-to-peer platform. There are tons of options out there. I am not associated with any of these exchanges. I just Googled crypto exchanges. This is kind of the list that I got. There's probably tons of more options out there. They all have certain advantages or disadvantages, if you will. They have different fee structures. They have, all sorts of different options. Some of them have better user interfaces. Some of them are easier to navigate. Some of them are available in your jurisdiction or your country. Some of them may not be available in your country. So you're going to have to do your research into what is a, let's say, reputable, and viable exchange in your jurisdiction, right? So this is important. So I'm not going to go into a full comparison right now, but if you're brand new into this, I recommend starting with something simple and reputable. And I'm not even going to throw out a recommendation, because if I throw one out there, it may or may not be available in your country, right? Um, Again, if I'm looking at an exchange, I want something that has a simple to easy to navigate user interface. It's clean, that they have clear guides for new users. They have clear processes and clear procedures for how you port in money or port in fiat, right? Because you're going to need to fund your account or fund your exchange account with some level of fiat currency, right? So again, I have no affiliation with any of these exchanges. And I know a lot of people who've had an easy time getting started with some of these exchanges on this slide here. But again, choose a platform that's regulated in your country, that has a good reputation, enables things like two-factor authentication, security, all of those things, right? But anyways, do some research. There's a lot of really good options out there, but this shouldn't be your hurdle. But essentially, I'm giving you here many different options of how you can start to buy Bitcoin. So that answers that question, right? That answers, how do we actually buy Bitcoin? Well, I've shared this with you right now. So the next question that I get is, and I get this all the time now, which is, should I buy Bitcoin or just get a Bitcoin ETF or just invest through Bitcoin ETFs, right? So an ETF, right, is an exchange traded fund, right? And this is actually a flow chart, which I found to be kind of interesting. I mean, there's so many different parameters that you would probably want to evaluate if you're trying to really make an educated decision of, should I buy the actual underlying Bitcoin itself, or should I just get exposure to Bitcoin via an ETF? That's really the question that you're trying to ask, right? So again, an ETF is an exchange traded fund. It's basically a stock market product that tracks the price of Bitcoin. It's like buying a share of a fund that holds Bitcoin for you. Some examples, right, are GBTC from Grayscale, IBIT from BlackRock, You even have MicroStrategy stock, right, which owns about 3% of all the Bitcoin ever mined. And each of these gives you exposure to Bitcoin. Again, I'm not associated with any of these ETFs or stocks, none of them, right? But all of them will give you some level of exposure to Bitcoin. And an advantage of an ETF is that, of course, it's super easy. You can buy it in the same brokerage account that you use for stocks. So you don't really need to worry about crypto exchanges, about getting verified and validated, about how you transfer your fiat currency into the exchange account. You can buy Bitcoin or Ethereum ETFs in the same brokerage account, again, that you use for stocks. So no new applications, no new platforms, no, learning about how you store your Bitcoin, because you've probably heard about things like self-custodying Bitcoin, and there's certain procedures that you should, best practices, I will say, that you should adopt in terms of storing Bitcoin, and not worrying about losing things like private keys, because again, you can lose if you don't do it properly. There is risk that you could lose your Bitcoin. I have family members who bought Bitcoin at absurdly low prices that have lost their Bitcoin forever, right? But the downside here is you don't actually control the Bitcoin. The fund does. You own the exposure to the price, but not the asset itself. So owning Bitcoin directly is more work at first, of course. You need to learn about how to store it securely, maybe with a hardware wallet, but you get full control. For example, it's the digital equivalent of holding physical gold bars instead of a gold ETF. And just like with gold, there's a case to be made that over time, the real thing will be more valuable than the paper claim to it. So that's a lot to unpack in this question of should I buy Bitcoin versus ETFs? But I have a simple chart that comes from all of this. So which one is better, ETF or direct Bitcoin? I don't think I'm going to give you an answer, but it really comes down to your comfort level and goals. And again, this is not financial advice in any way, shape, or form. But if you want full sovereignty over your asset and you're willing to learn how to self-custody your Bitcoin, then owning Bitcoin directly is definitely the way to go, right? If you want convenience and you're okay with not having direct control, then ETF is a very simple way to get exposure without the learning curve. You still get the upside as well as all of the downside with Bitcoin's price movement. So again, if you own Bitcoin, the major point that you need to learn is how to securely store your Bitcoin. I would say that is point number one. And if you're owning a Bitcoin ETF, you have to understand that you don't control the underlying Bitcoin in that fund. Right. So the key is there's no one size fits all answer. For some people, starting with an ETF and transitioning later to direct Bitcoin makes sense. And again, there is something to be said about the whole analogy to gold, that there will be a case made maybe in the future and over time that self-custodying Bitcoin will be more valuable than having just a paper claim to Bitcoin. All right. So that's the question of should I buy Bitcoin or the Bitcoin ETFs? So let's move into the next question that I get, which is about timing the market, and which is the worst question ever because you can't time the market, right? But I often get, when should I buy Bitcoin? Is it a good time to buy Bitcoin now? And the funny thing is, this is the observation I always have, is that nobody ever asks me about buying Bitcoin when price is down. Not one person. I will be out there saying, I think it's a great time to buy Bitcoin. But anyways, no one will listen at that time. But as soon as Bitcoin starts climbing, I get flooded with messages saying, should I buy Bitcoin now? Should I buy Bitcoin now? Should I buy Bitcoin now? The truth is, nobody knows the perfect time to buy. Right? Absolutely no one. Trying to time the bottom or trying to time the top. I mean, it's if you're trying to time the bottom, it's like trying to catch a falling knife. You might get lucky, but you might also miss the opportunity entirely. And there are many different strategies that you can take, right, in order to understand when is a good time to buy versus not. And I think this goes way outside the scope of this video. We might talk about it in future videos, but trying to time the market is a very difficult thing to do. If people could do it, everyone would be like multi-millionaires. So anyways, one strategy that a lot of people use, and honestly, if you have a pension or even a 401k or you have any type of retirement savings account that is employer activated, basically what you're doing is dollar cost averaging, because every week or every 2 weeks or every month, you're putting some portion of your income into a retirement account, and that's called dollar cost averaging, or you might hear this as DCA. So one strategy a lot of people use is DCA. It's simple. It just means you buy a fixed amount. And again, the amount could also vary over time, but you buy it at semi-regular intervals, no matter what the price is. This DCA strategy is exactly what MicroStrategy does every week. They buy Bitcoin. It doesn't matter if the price of Bitcoin was $60,000 or if the price of Bitcoin was $120,000. Every week they buy more and more Bitcoin, and eventually they get to an average price of Bitcoin. So you can see this, right? This chart basically shows the price swinging up, the price swinging down, but the average in this chart, and again, this is, I don't know if this is an exact chart of Bitcoin or just an example of DCA, but it shows the average here is 40,000, but yet we've swung way over 60 and we swung way under 20, but the average is 40,000, right? So that's the example. Or the example is, I'm going to put in $100 a week into whatever. It doesn't have to be Bitcoin, could be anything else, could be the NASDAQ, could be the S&P 500. I'm not saying any of this is a good investment. I'm not your financial advisor. But for example, taking $100 a week, every week, rain or shine, and investing that. This takes the emotion out of investing and it smooths out your average cost over time, right? And again, Michael Saylor, the CEO of MicroStrategy, uses this form of strategy at a corporate level, buying billions of dollars of Bitcoin. He doesn't try to time the market. It's a way to build position steadily instead of making one big bet on a single day, right? So I'm going to put this all together. We talked about so many different things in today's episode, but I'm going to put this together in what I call the beginner's playbook. And again, I think I might add to this over time, but they're kind of like 5 different things that you could do, 5 or 6 different things. So number 1, forget this whole Bitcoin myth, right? That's the first thing I want to dispel. You don't need tons of money in order to start investing in Bitcoin. Start with what you can afford. Start with also what you can afford to lose. That's important as well. Start small, but start somewhere if you must. Number 2, pick your vehicle, right? And by vehicle, it means decide whether you want to own Bitcoin directly or via an ETF, right? And there's, again, we talked about different options there. If you decide to go direct, pick a reputable exchange and secure your account. This is important. If you decide to go via ETF, use your existing brokerage account. Likely you'll have all the options you need in your existing brokerage account, right? But that goes to point number 3, which is decide your custody plan. It's either through a reputable exchange and you self-custody, or you use an existing brokerage account. And then set your buying strategy. You can go lump sum, set it and forget it, right? Or you could go DCA, dollar cost average. Also understand what your time horizon is, right? The time horizon element, of course, is going to be different for different people, and that might affect your buying strategy potentially. Anyways, this is not financial advice. Again, there's probably a lot more content you can watch, or a lot more things you can read in order to devise a better buying strategy, if you will. And then the last point is do your homework, right? Keep learning about Bitcoin, keep learning about how to protect your investment, and do your homework before you invest. That's important, right? So whether you start with $10 or $10,000, I think the most important thing to understand is what you're buying and why you're buying it. And I think what I've tried to do in previous episodes is really get to the crux of why are you buying it? What is the bullish thesis on Bitcoin? What does that mean? What is the hurdle rate? What is currency debasement? What does that have to do with everything? What about inflation? What about all the 4-year cycles that are, coincident among each other these days? So anyway, so that's kind of my beginner's playbook. So if this video helped clear up some confusion or any confusion at all about buying Bitcoin or questions around Bitcoin, you might have actually more questions around Bitcoin. And if you do, please drop them in the chat. I'll take a look. They could probably be the premise of future videos. But if you learned something in today's video, please hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, drop your questions in the comments. And if you're wondering about something, I guarantee someone else is wondering about the exact same thing. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode. And like always, let's get after it.